Earlier when we hoisted up the anchor, I noticed that a bit of the road was chafed, and it happened overnight. And I'm glad that I stopped to take a look at it again today. Well, now that we're back from the mangroves, and it's because our road actually was cut. And the way this happened was up front here. The road popped off of the roller and got wedged right there in that little gap. And it seesawed back and forth all night long under heavy load. And that caused one of the strands here to split. So right now I just brought a knife. I'm gonna go ahead and sever this completely, and I'm gonna resplice these two together.
The first step is pretty straightforward. Nice clean cut through the road, and then we can move on to the splicing. I like to mark about 1 foot from each end and wrap it with electrical tape nice and tight. This prevents the ends from unraveling any further than this. I also like to wrap the bitter end of each strand. I don't show it, but off camera, I actually cut the ends at a 45-degree angle to make the braiding a lot easier. Once all the tips are wrapped, the 3 strands are unraveled from both ends of the rope. The 2 ends are then mated, making sure that the 3 strands from each end are intercalated with the strands from the other end. Then I pick the strand from one end and pass it under a strand from the other end that is still braided. This should be done as close as possible to the junction where the 2 ropes meet. I repeat this process with all of the loose strands, making sure they each pass under a unique braided strand. It should look something like this. Then this process is continued by picking a loose strand, skipping over one braided strand, and passing it under the next braided strand. If you don't skip a strand, you're left with the loose end passing right through the rope, and that's not what you want. It should be braided. This process is a little tedious, and it can get a little confusing at times, but if you just stick with it, eventually the braid becomes very apparent, and it starts to look something like the final product.
That right there would probably hold us, but I'll keep going.
I'm almost done with this splice. I just have to remove the electrical tape from the middle of the braid, and then I have to do something with the loose strands from each end. And there's many ways to finish a splice. The bitter ends can be whipped and sewn into the rope. They can be wrapped in tape or just simply cut. I've never had an issue with a straight cut, and because I have plenty of splice, that's what I'm going to do here. I just take my sharp knife and cut the bitter ends as close to the splice as possible.
Okay, now we gotta put tension on it.
I'd prefer not to think of the consequences if our road had been cut in the middle of the night, but worst case scenario is a total loss of the vessel, and the best case scenario is a rude awakening in the middle of the bay and having to scramble to replace the anchor and chain, probably in the middle of nowhere.
Cool.
Well, if you made it this far, thank you for watching this short little episode, and we'll catch up again on the sail down to Cabo.
Call that a job well done.